Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and it is so good to have you here. Today we're going to be talking about the state of journalism in a post-COVID world. Finding information is easier than ever before, but what is a reliable source and how do you separate fact from fiction? Media expert Frank Sapola is standing by. First up though, we're going to be talking about guns, sex education, affordable housing, and some of the other hot-button issues state lawmakers will be addressing this fall as they reconvene in Trenton. So let's get to it. Dr. Ben Dworkin is the director of the Rowan Institute for Public Policy and Citizenship. We are happy to welcome him here to the show, and we're going to be talking about what lawmakers in Trenton are focusing on now that we are in the full swing of fall. Dr. Ben Dworkin, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you, Laura. Thank you so much for having me back.
Absolutely. Well, it's always hard to believe how quickly the summer goes. And there were some issues that we thought maybe lawmakers would get to in the summer. But now that they're back in fall, no excuses. What do you think is top of the agenda?
Well, I think we just have to put this in a certain context. You know, the legislature is coming back into session this fall, having a economy that has been doing very well. The state coffers are as flush as we've seen in 40 years. And that meant in the June budget they passed during the summer, the state legislature led by the Democrats were able to put away nearly $6 billion in surplus. Now this matters because normally in the fall, you're really worried about the economy. You're worried about a lack of resources, about things that might be needed. You don't have those same worries today. As the legislature comes back into session, they're looking at a handful of other things. And I think one of the big issues that the legislature is going to take up this fall is going to be gun control. New Jersey had a concealed carry prohibited, being the ability, unless under very certain circumstances, to carry a concealed handgun. We had a law very similar to what New York had, and New York's law was ruled unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court. So I think New Jersey is going to, like New York, going to try and address that with new legislation to keep the general purpose of that law while not violating the Constitution.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have trouble rectifying in their mind going to the first part of what you said. When you're talking about the state having all this money, they've got a $6 billion surplus, while so many people are really struggling to pay the bills. Luckily, gasoline is coming back down again. It's only $3.75 a gallon or what have you. But they have a hard time understanding. They're like, well, how does the state have so much money and taxpayers don't have any? Can you just help rectify it so people understand that?
There are two reasons I think we can look to as to why the state is doing so well. And the first is we effectively have a laptop economy when it came to COVID. What that meant was if you worked on your laptop and you can move the laptop home, you basically kept your job. For the most part, those folks are paid better salaries than folks who are working in retail, who are working in the service industry. So in the laptop economy, these high wage earning folks in New Jersey generally kept their jobs, made their salaries, and because New Jersey has such a progressive income tax, progressive meaning the more you make, the more you pay, New Jersey kept making money here, and so those folks were able to pay into the coffers, and it just continued. And the other reason why New Jersey's coffers, and this is even more ironic, why they're so flush, is because of inflation. You know, when prices start going up, our sales tax generates more money. And so you have a situation where we were charging 6.625% sales tax on item X that used to be $20. Now it's $32. We're getting the state is collecting more money. And so for those two reasons, that's really why we find ourselves in a situation we haven't found ourselves really in 35, 40 years.
Yeah, so is now a good time to start paying off whether it's debt or investing in infrastructure. I mean, $6 billion is a lot, but can also go quite quickly if the economy turns. So do you think that people are coming to the legislature saying, hey, you need to make sure you're spending, or do we need to save that money? What's the most fiscally prudent thing to do?
Well, that was the great debate in the spring and the early summer as the legislature was going through this. What do we, if we're going to prioritize spending because we have the money, what are we spending it on? And there are any number of concerns that the economy could turn. There are, a number of economists who are predicting a recession in the coming year, and you want to be protected for that. Especially, this is a strictly political calculation. The legislature, every seat in the legislature is up for re-election in 2023. And so you want to hold the money back, because the last thing any of these folks wants to do is to raise taxes in an election year.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the reasons they put such a significant portion of about 12% of the budget into surplus. And the legislative leaders also made a very conscious decision to really avoid putting funding into new programs that were going to be ongoing. Things that we're going to have to find money for this program next year and the year after that. They paid for existing line items. They might have increased the money a little bit this year, and they paid for a lot of one-shot spending items, things that we can just get done while we have the money. But lots of folks said, "Hey, the state's flush. Come and support this program. That's so important." And any number of folks have what they consider important. The legislature really tried to push those folks off and did not support them because they didn't want the obligations next year and the following year when the economy might not be as robust.
All right. So actually thinking ahead and not making it the other guy's problem.
A bit ironic from what we usually expect from the legislature.
Yes, yeah,
And
right.
so
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. All right. So we've got budget issues. We have gun issues. What are some of the other topics you think we'll be hearing about that we're ruminating in Trenton?
Sure. A couple things. First of all, there are lots of folks in the state who work in government at the local level, county level, and at the state level who are all part of the state health benefits program. And what we found out in early July was that some of these workers, the folks on the local level who are part of the state health benefits plan, are facing a 24% rate hike. This shocked a lot of people. But that's going to have to be dealt with. Nobody wants to have all their local employees yelling at them about this. So I think we're going to see some legislation to try and address the issues of this significant state health benefits plan rate hike. Sex education is going to be a big topic. Now, there's a lot of information and misinformation about the new state proposals and what the Board of Ed has said and has not said. And because there's a tremendous amount of confusion, I think you'll see the legislature actually step in to try and inform the public and to address what the public will be perceiving as concerns. This is going to be a hot topic in the campaigns for Congress that we're going to see throughout the fall in New Jersey. But the legislature, because these are state proposals about sex education, the legislature will be involved. And two other issues that I think we're going to expect to see. One is affordable housing. There's a lot of history about this, but basically the courts in the 1970s got themselves involved in affordable housing. The state legislature said, we don't want people unelected folks in robes making decisions about affordable housing for my town. So they created COA, a state agency effectively to deal with affordable housing.
And that stands for the Council for
the Council
Affordable
on
Housing.
Housing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And what happened is that over 30 some years, COA was effectively decimated by budget cuts and a lack of attention. So the courts had to step in again in order to deal with the questions of how much is is enough affordable housing in community X or community Y. I think the legislature is going to be looking at trying to deal with that. And finally, when the state forced all these businesses to close down, lots of people went on unemployment. And we have an unemployment insurance fund that is paid for by the businesses in large part to help people when there's high unemployment. From the business community's perspective, the government forced us to shut down. Now I have to pay more. Should we force my business to shut down? Now I have to pay more because you made me lay off all these people. And so the business community is looking for some additional support. Some has already been given. The payments have been stretched out over 3 years. But we're talking about $250 million in a cost for the business community that one would expect will be passed on to the consumers. Not everybody wants to see that. And so I think you're going to see the legislature trying to do something with the funds that they have to help offset that potential passed on increase for consumers.
Yeah, so you touched on a lot of hot button topics: guns, sex education, affordable housing. Do you anticipate, and you're a professor, so you're around a lot of college students, obviously. Do you see people really getting more and more involved, more so than they have ever been in the past? And would you say that's a good thing or a bad thing? Because during COVID, people they sat and they watched, and I felt, especially young people, they got very engaged. And some of these topics that you touched on, there is a lot of misinformation out of there. So do you anticipate the public really getting involved? And is it for better or worse? What's your take?
Look, one of the wonderful things, if you're a person like me teaching political science, one of the wonderful things about New Jersey is that we have an election every year. In even years, we have congressional and U.S. Senate races. In odd number years, we have legislative races and races for governor. And so each of these years, every year, we see millions of dollars being spent to educate and mobilize the New Jersey electorate. This will happen all the time. So issues like sex education and what is appropriate for an 8th grader to know or not know, or a 6th grader to know or not know, these things are always going to be debated, and there's going to be millions of dollars on advertising spent to try and get people motivated. I find, yes, I think politics, which used to be a dirty word, is a little bit less dirty for young people. I think a lot of young folks in particular, because that's the community you first referenced and that I deal with perhaps most often, is engaged because they understand a lot is at stake. And this is across the political spectrum. It's not exclusive to one side or the other. Right. So yes, I think we're going to see a lot of money spent on trying to educate the public on a whole bunch of these issues, simply because we have campaigns all the time in New Jersey.
Right. Yeah. Some used to joke that New Jersey should be nicknamed the election state because there is always an election going on.
It's one of the great things about this state.
Yeah. And hey, if there's any students from Rowan watching this right now, they can sign up and take your class and get even more in depth on all of these topics, right?
And then they'll know what they're talking about. That's
exactly,
what I like to tell them.
Exactly. All right. Ben Dworkin of Rowan University, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Always good. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Laura. Greatly appreciate it.
Frank Sapolo has been a radio and TV reporter in and around New York for more than 40 years. He's probably best known to our audiences as a former co-host of News 12 New Jersey's Morning Editions. That's where I got to know him best. He also worked as a reporter and anchor at Channel 9 News in New York City, WNBC Radio, and elsewhere. He also owns a guest placement and media coaching company, Contact Media. Frank, it is so good to see you.
Pleasure to see you as well. We know each other low these many years. And by the way, it should be
Yeah.
WNBC.
Thank you. I wanted to so much to WNBC. All right, first question. We're talking about journalism in New Jersey, even though it was New York. New York covers New Jersey. Were you ever taught that? Were you ever told that's how you have to say it?
WN. Oh, yes.
Oh, really?
WN. Oh, yeah.
That wasn't, I mean, I know that was, for our audience members who are wondering what are they talking about, it was Howard Stern infamously talked a lot about that in one of his movies, Private Parts, about WNBC, and he didn't want to say it that way. But they did coach it that way.
Yeah, they did. They told everyone we had to say WNBC.
WNBC. All right. Well, Frank, let's talk a little bit about journalism in New Jersey. When I was first starting out, you know, we were just talking. How long have we known each other? More than 2 decades, quite some time. But the way we used to gather news is very different than how it's gathered today. So can you talk a little bit about just the challenges in general for reporters out there covering politics and anything else?
Well, you know, when we covered politics, we showed up at a press conference, right? And we asked any question we wanted. I think politicians have 2 things now that they didn't have then. First of all, a lot of them, including the mayor of New York and also at some other press conferences, will dictate to you what we're talking about today. So in other words, we're only answering questions about this today. Or some will even go to a press conference and say, I'm not taking any questions. There will be no questions taken today, it irks the heck out of me, because that's what we're supposed to be doing, asking questions. And you're dictating to us exactly what it is we can ask, number one. Number two, they also have their own media outlet, and that's Facebook. So if they don't need the media to come down and cover a story about a new K9 unit, they could take some video, put it up on Facebook, and a lot of stations who are pressed for reporters and photographers will take the video off there. So they have their own channel to advertise what it is they're doing. The job of a good reporter now, and I think we talked about this before, you know, the restaurant always looks beautiful. The front of the house looks terrific, but a good reporter goes into the kitchen. He wants to know what's happening there, how the food is being made. That's what a good reporter does. And unfortunately, because not a lot of them have a bunch of experience now, they're few and far between, especially in New Jersey. I just finished reading Governor Cody's book. I don't know if you've ever read that before. And it just reinforced everything I knew about New Jersey politics, because both you and I have covered New Jersey politics, and it's an entity upon itself.
Yeah, you've got to go. You've got to experience it. And you really have to know those people locally. And a lot of times when, as a consumer of news, you're reading quick headlines and you might be getting a national view or something that really, you know, to really get to truly understand what's happening, no matter what the story is. One of the first things I do is I'll go look locally to what happened, no matter what the story is, because those local reporters, they do still exist. There aren't as many of them, but, you know, they have to live and work in the community. So a lot of times that's where you find some of your best journalism. It's not necessarily of the major networks. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, a lot of these patch reporters break stories. A lot of these local newspapers, of which unfortunately there are becoming fewer and fewer, they break stories. A lot of television stations and vice versa look into the newspapers to see what's going on. That really begins the conversation. You know, the good thing that reporters have is they're not necessarily, although a lot of them post stories online, they still have deadlines that are a bit more flexible. So if I'm covering something, I can go to my editor and say, look, this might be good for Thursday's paper. I don't think for Monday. I still have to talk to A, B, and C. And you and I have worked in a busy newsroom. We've been told to go out and get all the details on a particular story, and get it done by 5 o'clock. I once had a news director tell me, Frank, I want you to do a deep dive on this story. I want you to get really into it. I want you to give me a real good report from every angle. It was 3 PM, and I had to get it done by 10 o'clock. So I mean,
yeah.
how much time did I have? The clock is always managing you, and especially if you're in television. In print industry, you have a bit more time.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up print, because in so many newspapers, they're not even print, or everything is online, digitally available. But there's still something about looking at that printed newspaper, seeing where something is above or below the fold. But yet, you know, our kids, my kids, they don't see newspapers. You know, they get everything online. Do you think newspapers will ultimately die out and we won't have those in the next few years?
Well, listen, I love newspapers. I grew up on newspapers. I grew up on Time magazine and Newsweek magazine. You know, I'd sit down and have an experience with the magazine. You're absolutely right. I am, however, in the camp of, I think it's good that we have more iPhones out there taking video, seeing what's happening. A lot of stuff I see posted is, quite frankly, silly. But, you know, we would not have known about George Floyd had there not been an iPhone there. The police could have said something along the lines while he was struggling to the very end. But we had it on tape. So, you know, I'm a fan of having smartphones. I'm not a big fan of citizen journalists. And I'll tell you why. Because when I worked in the newsroom, when I first started out, there was always the crusty gray beard at the end of the news desk, and he was the editor. And nothing got on the air until he or she said it could go on the air. And, you know, that's missing in this citizen journalism stuff. You know, you show
Right.
up at a, you don't know if one person was killed or two, and it doesn't really matter. You just want to get it up on Facebook or Instagram or tweet it and get it out there. So the crusty old gray beard who was the guy or the woman who really gave it to you when you got it wrong is not there anymore.
Yeah, and that is so important because, like you said, people will go for the quick headline, and oftentimes it's wrong. And people don't care that they're wrong, that they care, it seems a lot of people care that they are first. A lot of newsrooms just want to get it out there and, well, we can update or we can correct it. They don't have that depth of knowledge. And
No.
and that is what I know I miss. And a lot of people watching, you know, they want to get that depth of knowledge. They want that perspective. Because when you read a headline, you get that sometimes knee-jerk reaction, and oftentimes it's wrong, it's not well thought out, and it doesn't have that perspective.
Or it's just silly, Laura. You know, I see stories often online about the daughter of some minor reality show star who was seen on a beach in the Caribbean rocking a
Yes.
black suit and packing on the PDA with somebody. And,
Yes.
you know, it's a thong, she's getting cheeky. And all of that is just nonsense. It's cotton candy that should not even be put in the same category as quote unquote news. But this is a lot of what we have. We have a lot of people, influencers, just doing silly stuff all day long. As my mother used to say, and she told me every day after I watched an hour or so of cartoons, she turned the TV off and say, go do something constructive. And she was right. She was absolutely.
Just one final thought on this. Do you think that the pendulum will eventually swing back the other way? Because like you said, people are reporting on what such and such celebrity of the daughter of whoever is posting about. I mean, you know, like I find that kind of difficult to read sometimes. It's like, wait, you're reporting on what somebody tweeted or Insta or Finsta or what have you. Do you think it'll swing back the other way to where we, as my daughter just went off to college, will we see people, really getting back in there and bringing that honor back to journalism?
Well,
that
I would hope
integrity,
so.
that trust, because people don't always trust.
Yeah, and this doesn't help. I remain optimistic that people will understand that that is just cotton candy for the brain and it's nonsense. And let's not forget, when somebody tweets something that's a bit controversial, everybody has to clap back or, throw shade or whatever the case may be. To me, that's all nonsense. But, I have faith in the fact that there will be probably a tier of newspapers and networks and, commentators and so on, whom we can respect and listen to. I tell all my friends who are starting in the industry, the best thing you could do is read. And don't just read what you'd like to read. Just read a book once in a while. Read a history book. I've had younger reporters talk to me about something they know nothing about because they never read about it. They read 2 or 3 paragraphs on some website and they think they have full knowledge of the subject matter. And that's not the case. Listen, there's a lot of great young reporters. A lot of them I respect. They're excellent on the air. But you need some of the older folks like us or like me, Laura. Sorry I insulted you, but certainly, this is my 45th year. So, I've been around. I'm the old crusty gray beard minus the beard, but you need more people like that in the newsroom.
It's hard to believe that we've been in this industry 30, 40 years, and yet we're still 27, 28 years old. That is TV magic, my friend.
We were 12. We said
That's
that.
the magic of Frank Sapola, it is always a pleasure to see you and speak with you. And we'll have you back on because then we can talk about, how things have changed just by being able to zoom in a call. And but that'll be a topic for another day. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Governor Phil Murphy announced the acquisition of a 9-mile former rail line, which will be converted into a new state park. It will connect 8 Essex and Hudson County communities, creating new recreation and open space.
9 miles of new green space through some of our state's most densely populated areas. 9 miles for healthy recreation, for cycling, for running, and for walking, and notably for many residents who otherwise don't have ready access to open space for these activities. 9 miles that will attract people from up and down the state, from across our region, unlocking new opportunities for local economic growth. 9 miles for potential commuting, getting folks off congested highways and out of greenhouse gas emitting cars and onto 2 wheels.
The project is being funded with $20 million from the Federal American Rescue Plan. And that will do it for today. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we look forward to seeing you back here next time.